Many households continue to raise concern over high cost of electricity, which is also affecting the manufacturing industry. In this bulletin, we're bringing on board the chairperson for the Electricity Sector Association of Kenya, that is George Aluru, to bring us into perspective why the high cost of electricity. Why can't we have a cheaper electricity like other countries such as Ethiopia? George?
Thanks, Irene, for the questions. A very good question, and I know a lot of us actually do that comparison between Kenya and other countries. But I think before we start discussing about lowering the cost, you have to first contextualize in terms of what is our cost compared to the other countries and what builds up the cost. So what you find in Kenya is that our costs are actually reflective of the cost of production. So there's no subsidies. But in markets like Ethiopia, like in, I think Ethiopia, also Egypt is also a very popular comparison. You find that the government actually subsidizes the electricity, and this is not really a sustainable way to go. Of course, as power producers and as independent power producers, we do feel the pinch that the Mwananchi is facing. Of course, we are working together with the government to see what can be done. I think there's discussions ongoing around that, but just to inform the general public that it's not really that we are super costly. It's more that the comparison that we make with other countries is not really a like-for-like kind of comparison.
I believe you must have got also concerns from the manufacturing sector.
Yes.
But at the same time, there are those ones who have raised concern that cheap is expensive, and that they would prefer to get that expensive electricity than getting a cheap and rationed electricity. What is your take in regards to this?
I think that's it's a good concern. Of course, again, not trying to forget that the population is crying about the cost of electricity, but what we should really focus on is getting the right quality of electricity, that it is there when you need it at the quantity that you need every time. Cost is something that over the long term, as we go into other ways of procuring power, as more renewable energy gets into the grid, the cost will come down. In the short term, we really need to focus on the quality of supply. Most of these manufacturing entities will tell you that they really suffer from the quality of supply, not just the cost. So if you have power, but half the time it's not there, or you have a breakdown and you have an issue trying to bring it back on, it takes a lot of time. This is what costs the manufacturers even more. So availability of power is really what and I mean quality availability of power.
Now, you know, it's taking so long because time and again we have heard the government saying we're going to reduce electricity, and somehow it's coming back to you, the independent producers, for this special commodity. What takes it so long? Because last year the government said it will reduce the cost of electricity by 30%, but so far we have only seen 15%. Why there's so much delay to put to place these other 15%?
I think first we must appreciate that it takes quite some effort to build a power plant. So before that power is produced, there's a lot of investment that goes into it. There's a lot of time and hard effort, and also within negotiating of these contracts that we are talking about today. So it's not a very easy thing to do, to just kind of open up the contracts and reduce the cost, the price on the contract, because there's a lot that goes into it. So the number you end up with as a tariff is composed of many building factors. So you have your cost of actually developing the project. So in Kenya, you'd find typically like a wind project takes 6, 7, 8 years to develop, and as you develop it, you are building up cost. So if you can work out a way of shortening these periods and the cost of developing projects, then we can start to see lower tariffs. And of course also things like competitive bidding. Once we do, and we have started going in that direction, once we get into a setup where we are doing competitive bidding, then you can find lower costs. But for the short term, it's not really very realistic to achieve sharp reductions. I think the government has done a good job up to now. At least we have the first 15%, and they are working on modalities to actually deliver the next 15%.
George, from where you sit, you have said it takes time to put up a power plant.
Yeah.
But look at, for instance, the power plants in Turkana. It's complete, but again, it's taking so long for it to start supplying power, which could, in other words, reduce the cost of electricity in Kenya. What happens? Why the delay for them to take over the mandates that could be given to them?
I think maybe just to correct you, the power plant in Turkana is actually on. It has been online now, I think, for two or more years, 2+ years. They are delivering, of course. Yeah, but I think maybe the initial challenges were to do with the transmission line. There was issues around the transmission line and acquisition of the land for that transmission line. But now it's online. Of course, even with that, you must consider that they developed a project in a very remote place, and of course there's a build-up of costs, because you need to build roads, you need to build the transmission line itself, almost 400 kilometers. So then all these things build up to the tariff. And as I was saying, once we start to get even more renewable energy into the grid, and we move into competitive tenders, and then you find projects that are now located in areas that are, I would say, already there's the grid, there's a road, there's all these amenities that come up with the project, then the price will be lower.
And what gets into power purchase agreements?
Sorry, just
from where you sit, what goes into power purchase agreements as independent electricity producer?
Yeah. So power purchase agreements are basically a split of risks. So you want to assure that whoever has the best capability to manage a certain risk gets allocated that risk. So in this case, the independent power producers are able to assure that their power plants will be ready to deliver power at a certain time, at a certain voltage, at a certain location. And then on the other side, the KPLC has to assure that the demand will be ready to actually take up this power. So, and then amongst other things, you also have risks of if let's say the power producer is not ready to deliver the power, but KPLC is ready to take it, how do you penalize them? And the other way around, if you are ready to give power to the grid, but the grid is not ready to take it, how do you get compensated? So it's mostly a balance of this kind of risks in that contract.
And this week, on Thursday, we're expecting the national government to read the budget. What could be your expectations, George, as the energy sector and also as an independent producer?
And our wish list, I guess, would be that we have a review of some of the taxes that could really help us to reduce the overall cost of power, especially taxes around, for the thermal side, the tax that goes into fuel for power generation, and of course any other corporate VAT measure that can be reduced, targeted at helping us to reduce that cost of power.
And as we come to the close, there is concern on the high cost of living. Would we have hope in the near future from where you sit? Where do you predict Kenya is heading to come next year in terms of electricity?
Well, I think we have hope. Let's have hope. There's a bright future for us. I think most of these reforms that are being undertaken are very beneficial for the electricity market in general. In the end, we will end up with a reduced cost. I can't give a good idea of the timelines, but I can assure Kenyans that whatever reforms that are going on are actually for the betterment of the industry.
Thank you, George. That is George Aluru, the Chairperson of Electricity Sector Association of Kenya, bringing us into perspective in regards to high cost of electricity in Kenya, which is also not only affecting households, but also the manufacturing sector, and this raises the cost of living here in the home country.